Hi, you're right. This is Mr. Bono, and we are continuing with the play of Macbeth. Now, in Act One, we read together scenes 1 through 3. We're jumping over scene 4 and coming to scene 5 today. Okay, now we were focused on Macbeth. Okay, now you remember we started with the witches making a plan to meet after the battle was done, and then there was the fighting, and Macbeth was a hero in 2 separate battles. And then he meets the witches, and they tell him that he is now Thane of Glamis, he will soon be Thane of Cawdor, and then one day he will be king. But his children will not be kings. And the witches say that Banquo's children will be kings, even though Banquo never will. Okay, so those predictions are made, and at the same time, or we learn that the king has decided to give Macbeth the honor of Thane of Cawdor or Lord of Cawdor, and so we know that before Macbeth does, and we know that wish is going to come true. So it makes us wonder: is he also going to become king? Are the witches correct? And if he does become king, why won't his children become kings? Why will Banquo's become king? So all these questions are out there at the beginning. Okay. But Macbeth writes a letter home to his wife. Okay. And that's where we are at Act One, Scene 5. This is Lady Macbeth, Macbeth's wife. Okay. And here is the letter that Macbeth wrote her to tell her all of what I just told you. Okay. Um, and I forgot to mention that after the witches give their predictions to Macbeth, then 2 messengers come up to Macbeth and Banquo and confirm that they tell him that, in fact, the king has already given him the title Thane of Cawdor. And so Macbeth says he can't believe it. He's shocked. And now he's really thinking about, well, what's the next step? How will I become king? Okay. So that said, because that's his big dream and his wife's dream to become queen. Okay. So here's the letter that Macbeth wrote. I'm not going to read that to you. Okay. Because your first task for today is in your workbook. Okay. And I'll just point it out to you. Here's your assignment. Okay. I'm attaching the Macbeth workbook. That's where the questions and the tasks are. Okay. But you can also see them here. I'm going to show them to you. So your first task is task 6, and it's just a short piece of writing. Okay. I'm going to try to, oops, zoom in even more here. And sorry, still getting the hang of moving these around. Okay, there we go. Now, in this task, Macbeth decides to write a letter to his wife to tell her he's on his way home from war and to inform her that a guest, King Duncan, is coming to stay with them. Write Macbeth's letter. Okay, that's your task here. You write the letter. Now, this part will really help you. Think about what Macbeth might want to include in his letter. Here are some ideas or suggestions. Okay, so first of all, include his experiences in the bloody war against Norway. Okay, you can go back to our last video, or you can just use your memory to say, what would he say to his wife about what happened in those battles? Okay, what would he say to his wife about meeting the witches on the heath? And what did they tell about his future? What were their prophecies or their predictions? Okay. He should tell his wife about his new title, the Thane of Cawdor. Okay. And also, he should give the news that King Duncan is coming to stay at the castle. Okay. It doesn't have to be a very long letter. Okay. But make sure that you write as Macbeth to tell his wife these things. Okay. And then you can use these to check your work. Okay. Plan it out. Okay. You don't need to rewrite or redraft. Just get a first draft down neatly. Okay. And did you tick all the boxes here? Did you include all these parts? Okay. So that's your first task. Okay. If you want to come back to this part of the video, that's fine. If you want to pause the video here and do that part of the task, that's fine too. Okay, but I am going to continue. Okay. Now, we're just going to get a little background here. So one of the things you may have noticed about the play from the graphic novel we read is that the language used is different from the language that you use. What are the main differences? Can you think of reasons for these differences? Now, we noticed that they use some different words entirely. So, for example, ere, E-R-E, was used to say before. Okay, so that's one difference, is some of the words were completely different. Some of the ordering of the words is different as well. Okay, and what are the reasons? Well, this was written many centuries ago. Okay, and language changes over time. Okay, so let's hear a little more about this. Shakespeare and the Elizabethans, the people of the Elizabethan era under Queen Elizabeth, loved language. The average Elizabethan would have had about 20,000 words in his or her vocabulary. The average person today has around 4,000. That's shocking. So the typical person would have had 5 times as many words that they could use. Shakespeare himself introduced many new words and phrases into the language. Maybe you've heard of some of them before. Barefaced. Okay, if someone tells a barefaced lie or a bald-faced lie, okay, that came from Shakespeare. The word obscene, to vanish into thin air, that came from Shakespeare. Being cruel to be kind, and slept not one wink are just a few of the expressions that Shakespeare used first. Okay, now at the top of the page, many of the words used by Elizabethans are no longer used today. Think yourself lucky that some of them have disappeared, such as honorific habilitudinativus. Can you guess what that word means? Look it up if you like. All right. Now, you obviously can't discuss this in pairs, but you might ask yourself, okay, why do we stop using some words? Okay. Why do we sometimes stop using words? Okay, now, when I was a kid, people sometimes said something was totally tubular. Now, this was a word that came out of surfing and got into popular culture. Okay, and people started saying that. Okay, but it quickly went out of fashion. Okay, and then became kind of a joke. Okay, so in that case, it was cool for a minute because it was connected to a sport that was seen as interesting. Okay, but then people realized it was a little silly and they stopped using it. Okay, I'm sure you're aware of a lot of words that come into fashion and then go out because they're cool for a minute and then they stop being cool. Okay, but there are other reasons. Okay, some words we just don't need to use very more any longer because we don't use those things any longer. Okay, so which words do you think will no longer be used in 100 years' time? Do you think in 100 years will we still talk about videos? Will we talk about petrol? Will we talk about texting in 100 years? Okay, will the language change? Now, we're leading up to the second part of your task, okay? And I'm going to actually jump to the graphic novel again. Okay, now this is a different version, a different graphic novel, but the same story, Macbeth, from the one we watched the last time. Okay, just so you get to see a different style. So Lady Macbeth reads this letter from her husband. And now, sorry, jumping back, I want to read this to you. When Lady Macbeth receives Macbeth's letter, she speaks aloud to herself. This is called a soliloquy. Say that aloud to yourself. Soliloquy. Soliloquy. Why do you think characters on stage do this? Okay, why do they speak out loud to themselves? Okay, you probably guessed it. In the movies, they can do a voiceover where you see the character sitting there thinking, and then somebody who's off screen is saying the words that they're thinking. So, I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch today. Okay, and you see me sitting here. Now, on the stage, they speak out loud because you can't hear their thoughts unless they do that. Okay, so it's a way to give you the thoughts that are going in their mind. Okay, it's used to communicate the character's thoughts and feelings to the audience. All right, jumping back. So Lady Macbeth is now about to start talking aloud. She's the only one in the room at the start. And she's sort of thinking about thinking about her husband. And she says, "You are Thane of Glamis and Cawdor, and you will be king, as promised. But I worry whether you have what it takes to seize the crown. You're too full of the milk of human kindness to strike aggressively at the first opportunity." So what's she saying? Perhaps her husband is not aggressive enough to take his chance to be the king. He's too kind. She's still thinking about her husband. She says, "You want to be powerful and you don't lack ambition, so you're motivated, but you're missing the wickedness that should accompany that ambition." So she's saying to move up in the world, you need to be a little bit wicked, and you're not that way. The glory you wish for, you want to achieve righteously. Okay, so you want glory, but you want to do it the proper way, the good way. You won't cheat, but you want what doesn't belong to you. You wish for that thing, great Gloms, that calls you to commit a terrible act. And you wish to see the act done, but are too afraid to commit it yourself. Okay, so she's saying, you want to be the king, and that calls for something really awful to happen. What has to happen for him to become king? Well, the current king needs to be dead. And you want to see him dead, but you're too afraid to do it yourself. Hurry home, and I will pour my fighting spirit into your ear, and with my brave words I'll drive away everything that stands between you and the golden crown, which fate and witchcraft already have placed on your head. Okay, so she's saying, you are going to be the king, and I'm going to make sure of it. Okay, a messenger comes. What news do you bring? The king comes here tonight. You must be mad. Isn't Macbeth with the king? And if the king were really coming, wouldn't Macbeth have told me in advance so I could prepare? Please, my lady, it's the truth. Our Thane is coming. He sent a messenger ahead of him, who arrived here so out of breath that he could barely speak his message. Okay, so she's shocked. She has this plan about the king, and now she's finding out that the king is coming that same day. Now, wait till you see what she has to say. Take good care of him then. He brings great news. And then she says to herself, so the messenger is hoarse, like a raven, who croaks Duncan's fatal entrance into my fortress. So she's saying that King Duncan is going to die when he enters her fortress. Come, you spirits that assist murderous thoughts. So she's calling in evil spirits to help her. Take away my womanhood and fill me from head to toe with deadly cruelty. So she's asking the evil spirits to make her less like a woman. In this case, she's saying nurturing, okay, and make her cruel and deadly. Thicken my blood and stop up my veins so I can't feel pity, so that no human compassion can stop my vicious plan or prevent me from accomplishing it. She wants the spirits to make sure that she carries through with this murder. Come to my woman's breasts and turn my milk into poison, you murdering demons. Whatever it is, you wait invisibly, waiting to do evil. Excuse me, wherever. Wherever you are, come and help me do evil. Okay, again, she's saying, change me from a woman who nurtures children to life into a poisonous killer. Come thick night and shroud the world in the darkest smoke of hell, so that my razor-like knife can't see the wound it cuts open, and heaven can't peep through darkness to cry, no stop. Okay, so she really wants this murder to happen. Okay, and we're going to stop there and jump back to our book. Okay, and you have pieces of that speech here. Okay, but we've just read it. Okay, we've just read it. And we're going to continue on, okay, to the next page. And now the last part of your task is here. Okay, task 8, and you're only doing 1 through 3. You do not have to do number 4 at the bottom. Okay, so below is a mixed up or jumbled up modern day version of what Lady Macbeth just said. Okay, your job is to put them in the order that you think is correct. Okay, so she says all of these things, but what order should we put them in? I want to tell you of my evil plans. Okay, come here soon. You have the ambition to be the king or the motivation to be the king, but you're not evil enough to do anything about it. I'm afraid that you're far too nice. You are Thane of Glamis and now Cawdor, and you will also be king as predicted. Okay, so put those in the order that you think is the correct order. You can go back and listen to what we just read if that will help you. Okay, pause the video if you want to do that now. Okay, when you finish that, we're going to go on to number 2. Does Lady Macbeth's view of her husband match the view that the king and other members of the army have of him? So here's the question, right? She sees her husband in one way. She says, you're very ambitious, you want to be king, you would even like to see the current king dead so that you could become the king. Okay. Now, the question is, do other soldiers like Banquo or the other soldiers that he fought with or the king, do you think they see Macbeth the same way? Do they think he's somebody who would want the king dead? Okay, and so you can pause the video and answer that question in your notebook. Okay, and then number 3, what are your first impressions of Lady Macbeth? What do you think of her after what you just heard? Which of the following images do you think is most suitable, or which one do you think is a more appropriate picture of what she's like now at this point in the story? Okay, so choose one and just say which one it is. Okay, and maybe why. Okay, and that's really your work for Wednesday and Friday. So take your time, do it carefully, but I want you to stay on for just another minute because we're going to set up for the next day. Okay, we're going to read this part here. It's very short. The plan to kill the king. When Macbeth arrives home, he tells his wife that they are going to have a visitor stay with them that evening, the king. Lady Macbeth immediately sees this as an opportunity for Macbeth to fulfill his destiny, okay, the witch's predictions, and become king. In order to do this, she believes he will have to murder the king. She tells him to look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. Okay, I'm going to stop there. All right, thanks for your attention. You can tell the story is heating up. Let's see what happens next.